Good morning. You ready to hear a little bit more about Marty and Clark and their adventures with their little baby Missy? Well, we'll continue on today and see what happens to them today. Sunday was a cool day with the wind blowing from the west. After the morning reading and prayer, Marty's mind kept staying with the scripture. Clark was still reading from the Psalms, and Marty often found herself puzzled over some of the words. She was listening more closely now, and she often felt herself wanting to ask Clark to repeat slowly some portions so that she might ponder over its meaning. Could Clark's God be a comfort to others like he had been to the writer David? Marty acknowledged that she knew very little about Clark's God, and sometimes she caught herself yearning to know more. Bible reading hadn't been a part of her upbringing. She wondered in a vague way if she had missed something rather important. On occasion, Clark would give a few words of his own as a background or setting to the scripture for the day, telling a bit about the author and his troubled life at the time of his writing. Marty knew that the words were for her understanding, but she didn't resent it. Indeed, she drank it in as one thirsting for knowledge. This morning, as Clark prayed, Marty found herself wondering if she dared to approach Clark's God in the direct way that Clark himself did. She felt a longing within her to do so, but she held back. When Clark said amen, Marty's lips also formed the words. Breakfast began after Missy declared her loud amen, too. What are we going to do with this long day afore us? Marty thought. She knew that today she could not sew. She had defied Clark's God in so doing once, but to repeat it would be tempting his anger to fall upon her, and she couldn't risk that. If he had any help at all that he could spare for her, she desperately needed it. Clark interrupted her thoughts. On the way to town yesterday, I stopped me at the Grahams to see if there be anything that I might be getting them in town. Ma asked that we come for a visit and dinner today. Who knows how many nice Sundays we'd be having afore winter sets in. I said I'd check with you on it. Bless you, Ma, thought Marty. Oh, bless you, Ma. Out loud, she said quite calmly, I'd be a liking that. And it was settled. She hurried with the morning dishes, and when Clark went to get the team ready, she hastened to get Missy and herself ready to go. She dressed Missy in the new shirt and jumper with a pair of the new stockings and the little black shoes. She brushed out Missy's curls until they were light and fluffy. The child truly did look a picture as she whirled, twirled, and pirouetted, admiring herself. Marty then turned to her own dresses. She took the new blue-gray one from the hanger, but couldn't bring herself to wear it. It should have been for Clem, that dress, and somehow she just couldn't put it on to accompany Clark. If he failed to notice it, she'd be hurt, and if by some strange chance his eyes showed admiration, well, that would hurt even more. She didn't want admiration from him or any other man. She could still see clearly Clem's love-filled eyes as he pulled her to him. She smothered the sob in her throat and chose the plainer navy dress with the bit of lace trim at the throat and sleeves. Surely this one would be quite acceptable, even proper. She dressed in the new undergarments and the long stockings, put on the new shoes, and slipped the dress over her head. She'd wear the lighter bonnet and her new shawl. It wasn't cold enough to be needing a heavy coat. Carefully, she brushed out her curly hair and then decided to pin it up in a proper fashion. She had been dreadfully neglectful of it lately, she knew. It took her several minutes to arrange it to meet her approval, and just as she finished, she heard Clark call to see if they were ready. Missy went bursting from the room to meet her pa and was informed that she looked like a real little lady, and her pa was right proud of her. Marty followed, refusing to meet Clark's eyes. She didn't want to read anything there, whether real or imagined. She noticed as he helped her up to the seat of the wagon that he had changed from his work clothes and looked rather fine himself. As they traveled to the Grahams, she gave her full attention to the young Missy and the cool fall day. The day passed quickly at the Grahams. Marty helped Ma and the girls get the dinner on. This time, Marty was aware of what she ate and found Ma to be a very good cook, a fact which was no surprise to her. After the dinner, the men left for the sunny side of the porch so that they could man talk. Young Jason Stern put in an appearance, much to the blushing of Sally Ann. The two went for a walk, always in full sight of the house. The ladies made quick work of the dishes, and then Ma and Marty sat down for a chat. It was good just to sit and talk with Ma. Marty didn't mind her idle hands half so much with such pleasant company. After discussing the general women's topics, Marty took advantage of the fact that the rest were outdoors at various activities and the two young ones put down for a nap, to broach a subject that had been stirring within her. "Ma," she ventured, "could you tell me about Ellen? Seems that I should be knowing something about her, taking over her house and her baby." Marty made no reference to her man, Ma noticed, but made no comment on it. Marty then told Ma about the sewing machine and Clark's reaction to it. Ma sighed deeply and seemed to look off into space for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was a mighty shaky. Remember, Ellen is Clark's first wife that died right after Missy was born. "Don't hardly know what words to be a-tellin' it with," Ma said. "Ellen was young and right pretty too. Darker than you, and she be, and taller too. She was a merry and chattery sort. Loved everything and everybody, seemed to me. She adored Clark, and he 'peared to think her something pretty special too. When Missy was born, you should have seen the two of 'em." Ma shook her head and smiled gently. "Never seed two people so excited, like a couple kids they were. I delivered Missy. Fact is, I've delivered most babies hereabout, but never did I see anyone else get quite that excited over a newborn, welcome as they be. Well, Ellen, she was soon up and about and fussing over that new baby. She thought she was just beautiful, and Missy be right pretty too. Anyway, the months went by. Clark and Ellen was a-doing real good. Clark's a hard worker, and that's what farming's all about. You get what you're willing to pay for and sweating and an aching back. Well, things was a-going real good when one day last August, Clark came riding into the yard. He was real excited like, and I knew that something was wrong. "Ma," he says, "can you come quick? Ellen's in awful pain." That's what he says. I can hear him yet. So I went, yelling to the girls what to do while I be going. Ellen was in pain all right, tossing and rolling on the bed, holding herself and groaning. She refused to cry out because she didn't want Missy to hear her, so she just bit her lip till she had it bleeding. Wasn't much that I could do but try to keep her face cooled. There was no doctor to go for, and we just watched, hurting all over that we couldn't do anything for her. Clark was torn between staying with Ellen and caring for Missy. I never been so sorry for a man. Well, the night dragged by, and finally about 4 a.m, she stopped thrashing so. I breathed a prayer of relief, but it wasn't to be for long. She kept getting hotter and hotter and more listless. I bathed her in cool water over and over again, but it were no use. Ma stopped, waited for a moment, then took a deep breath and went on. That evening we lost her. And Clark. She stopped again. She brushed a tear away and stood up. But that be in the past, child, and no use going over it all again. Anyway, you be there now to care for Missy, and that's what Clark be a-needin'. It was awful hard for him to do all his fall work, toting that little one round on his back. I said I'd keep her on here, but I reckon Clark wanted her to know that she be his and something special, not just one of a brood. Besides, he never did want to be beholden to anybody. There was a childless woman in town who would have gladly took her, but Clark would have none of it. Said she would have growed up so spoiled she would have been unfit for even herself to stand. That's what Clark said. Anyway, Clark's prayers seem to be getting answered, and Missy has you now. And a right good mama you be, a makin' too, sewin' that sweet little dress and all. She patted Marty's arm. You're doing just fine, Marty. Just fine. Through the whole speech of Ma's, Marty had sat wide-eyed. The hearing of Clark's sorrow had opened afresh the pain of her own. She wanted to weep, but sat dried-eyed, feeling the horror of it all. It had been a shock for her to hear that Clem was dead, but she hadn't had to sit by him for hours, watching him suffer, not able to lift a hand to relieve him. She decided that she had had the easier suffering of the two. Oh, Clem, her heart whispered. Clem, I'm glad that you didn't have to bear pain like that. She roused as Ma bustled about, explaining that time had just flown and the men folk would be looking for coffee. The next morning at breakfast, Clark informed Marty that Thursday of the week Missy would have her second birthday. Marty felt concerned. She wasn't sure how Ellen would have celebrated the event. She didn't want to let Clark down, but how was she to know what the family chose to do about birthdays? She was rather silent, weighing the matter mentally for the rest of the meal. Clark sensed her mood and finally inquired, Something being a troubling ya? No, lied Marty and remained silent for a few minutes, then decided that would never do. If they had to share the same house, they'd just have to be frank and honest with one another. So she blurted out, It's just that I don't know what you would want planned for Missy's birthday. Do you have company? Do you have a party? Do something different? She shrugged. I just don't know. I see, Clark said, and she felt that he really did see. He got up and refilled their coffee cups. That blame, thought Marty, I missed that second cup again with my deep thinking. Clark didn't appear to be at all bothered by it. He sat back down and creamed his coffee, pushing his plate back and pulling his cup forward as though preparing for a lengthy stay. By this time, Missy was getting restless and wanting down from her chair. Clark lifted her down and ran into the sitting room to find her new book. Clark continued then. Funny thing, but I don't rightly remember any fixed thing that we'd be doing for a birthday. Seems in looking back that they were all might different somehow. Missy now, she only had one afore and she was a bit young then to pay it much mind. He hesitated. I think, though, that it would be nice to be having a cake for her. I got a doodad in town last Saturday while I was there. Hope it pleases her. Just a silly little thing, really, but it looks like it would tickle a little one. I don't think that we be needing company's help in celebrating. She'll enjoy it just as much on her own. Marty felt relieved. That kind of a birthday celebration she felt that she could handle. She sat quietly for a moment and finally raised her eyes to Clark's and said almost imploringly, I've been thinking. Seems that I don't know much about Missy, and seems as though I should be knowing a sight more if and I be going to raise her and all. You know how young'uns be. They like to hear their folks tell of when they did this and when they said that and how cute and clever they was and quick in their ways and all. Some day soon, Missy's going to be wanting to hear such things, and I should be able to tell her. The only thing I know about her is her name. Clark surprised her by laughing quietly. It was the first time that she had heard him laugh. She liked it, but she couldn't figure out the reason for it. He soon filled her in. I be thinking that you don't really know even that, he said. Her real name be Melissa Melissa Ann Davis. That's a pretty name, Marty said. I don't be going by my real name either. My real name be Martha, but I don't much like it. All my family and friends called me Marty, except my ma when she was mad. Then it was Martha, real loud like, Martha Lucinda. She nearly finished it with Claridge, but she caught herself in time. But tell me about Missy. Well, Missy be born on November 3rd, 2 years ago, about 4 o'clock in the morning. Clark's face became very thoughtful as he reflected back. Marty remembered Ma telling of the great excitement that Missy had caused. Clark went on. She weren't much of a bundle, seemed to me, and she was rather red and wrinkled and had a good head of dark hair. She seemed to grow fast and change a lot right from the start, and afore you knowed it, she was a cooing and a smiling. By Christmas time, she was most giving the orders around here, it seemed. She was a good baby, as babies go, and she slept through the night by the time she was 3 months old. I thought I'd picked me a real winner. Then, at 5 months, she started to cut her teeth. She turned from a sweet, contented, smiling darling into a real bear cat. Lucky for us, it didn't last for too long, though at the time it seemed forever. Anyway, she made it through. And so did we, and things quieted down again. When she had her first birthday, she could already say some words. Seemed right bright for a little tyke, and always from as far back as I can remember, she loved pretty things. Guess that's why she took so to the little whatever it be that you sewed for her. Started walking for her first birthday, and was soon climbing to match it. Boy, how did she get around? One day I found her on the corral fence, top rail, when she'd be just a wingin'. Got up there and couldn't get down. Hanging on for dear life she was. She was getting to be a right good visitor, too. A lot of company she was. Chattered all the time, and more there was getting to be some sense to it. One day she came in with a flower. Thrilled to pieces with it she was. Picked it right off the rose bush. The thorns had pricked her tiny fingers, and they was a-bleedin'. But she never paid 'em no mind at all. So determined she be to take the pretty to her mama. That flower is pressed in her mama's Bible. Clark stopped and sat looking at his coffee cup. Marty saw him swallow and his lips move as though he meant to go on, but no sound came. You don't need to tell me any more, she said quietly. I know enough to be able to tell young Missy something about her young days. She searched for words and found that any that she could bring to mind seemed inadequate, but she stumbled on. I know how painful it be to remember, and anyway, when the day comes that young Missy need hear the story of her mama, and she should hear it, to be sure, but when that day comes, it's her pa that she should be a-hearing it from. Marty rose from the table then, so that Clark need not fear that he was expected to say more. Slowly he finished his coffee, and she set to work getting her water ready to wash the dishes. The day was almost crisp in its coolness, but Clark announced that he planned to see how much sod he could get turned on the land he was claiming for spring planting. Marty hoped that the weather would hold, not just so that he could finish the planned plowing, but also so that he'd be busy away from the house. The days of the week went by slowly. Sometimes they went too slowly for Marty, but she was relieved that there was always work with which to fill them. What with washing, cleaning, bread baking, and meal getting, she seemed to even have to look for time in which to do Missy's sewing. Little garments did take shape under her capable hands, however, and Missy fussed and exclaimed over each one of them. Marty had a secret project on the go as well. Knowing of Missy's birthday had sent her mind scrambling over what she might be able to do for the little girl. She didn't have many options, really, not having a cent to her name, even if she had found a way to spend it. She then thought of the beautifully colored wool that Clark had brought and the brand new knitting needles. Each night, she retired to her room as soon as her day's tasks were taken care of, and with Missy sleeping soundly in her crib, the knitting needles clicked hurriedly. She must work quickly to be done in time. When she finally crawled off to bed each night, she was too tired to even lie for long and ache for Clem. She thought of him, and her last wish of the night was that he could have been by her side, cuddling close in the big double bed. But even though her thoughts turned to him, her tired body demanded sleep, and she felt too weary to even cry. The days passed, and Thursday dawned cold and windy. Clark was still determined to carry on with his plowing, even though Marty feared that he would surely take a chill by so doing. He paid no mind to her and went anyway. She wondered secretly if he wished to be away from the house as much as she wanted him to be. After dinner was over and Missy had been put down for her nap, Marty went to work on the birthday cake. She felt much more confident now, having practiced using Ma's recipes to a fair extent. Carefully she watched her fire on this day. It would not do to have it too hot nor to let it die out, as she often did. She sighed with relief when Missy's cake was lifted from the oven, appearing to be all that she had hoped for. The wind was colder now, and Marty found herself worrying even more about Clark. What in the world would she ever do if he took sick and needed nursing? That burned man, he shouldn't be taking such chances. She'd keep the coffee pot on so that whenever he decided to come in, she'd have a hot cup waiting. She'd do almost anything, she figured, to keep him on his feet and walking. Why, if he went down sick, she wouldn't know where to even start on the chores. She never even set foot in the barn, she realized. Some women folk had to do the milking all the time, and for that matter, some did the slopping of the hogs too. Clark hadn't even turned the feeding of the chickens over to her. Maybe he had expected it and she just hadn't done so. She had been so mixed up and confused when she came to this place that she hadn't even given it a thought. Well, she'd ask. Maybe tomorrow at breakfast, if the time seemed right. She was more than willing to do her rightful share. She heard the team coming and cast an anxious glance out the window. He'd be looking cold, all right. She pushed the coffee pot forward on the stove. When Clark came in, he stood for a few minutes, holding his big hands over the kitchen stove as if trying to scoop up handfuls of the heat to warm his chilled body. Marty poured his cup of coffee and went for some cream. She decided to also bring some muffins and honey in case he wanted a bit to go with the hot drink. He watched her from the stove and said nothing until she had set by his place at the table. "Won't you be a-joining me?" he asked then. "I hate to be a-drinking coffee all alone." Marty looked up in surprise, but answered evenly. "You be the one that be a-needin' it. You be a-chillin' yourself for sure, working out in that wretched wind and all. Lucky you be if you don't be putting yourself down over it. Come, you better be drinking this while it be hot." It was a mild scolding, but something in it seemed to tickle Clark. He smiled to himself as he crossed to the table. Women, honestly, one would think a man was made of sugar frosting, the way that they could carry on. He hid his smile and answered good-naturedly. "I may be the one a-needin' it, but I doubt that a few minutes at the table and off your feet be a-hurtin' you much either. You fuss too much, I be a-thinkin'." "No," Marty said solemnly. "No, I don't fuss too much. I just find that working sure beats moaning, that's all. But, as you say, a cup of coffee might be right good. I do declare, hearing that wind howl makes my blood chill, even though it be warm in here." So saying, she poured herself a cup of coffee and joined him at the table. After their coffee, Clark said that he had come home early from the plowing because he thought that a storm might be on the way and he wanted to have the rest of the garden things in the root cellar before it struck. So saying, he left the house to go to work. Marty turned to Missy's now cooled cake. She wanted it to look special for the little girl so used so used all of her ingenuity and material available for that purpose. When she was finally done, she looked at it critically. Wasn't great, she decided, but it would have to do. She placed it in the cupboard behind closed doors to await the proper moment for its appearance. She then set to work on plans for a little something extra for supper. Missy's call interrupted her at this point, and she went in for the little girl. "Hi there, Missy. Come to Mama," she said. She had said the words before and hadn't liked them, so she had not referred to herself as such since. As she spoke them now, they didn't seem nearly so out of place, though they still seemed strange to her. She lifted the wee one up, noticing as she did so that her own little one was demanding more room. She was glad that she had put plenty of fullness in the new dresses that she had made. Already she was needing some of it. Missy ran to get her shoes, and Marty carried child and shoes to the kitchen, where she put them on. Already it was chilly in the bedroom. She dreaded the thought of the cold winter ahead. How glad she was not to be in the covered wagon. The very thought made her shiver. She gave Missy a mug of milk and half of a muffin and went back to preparing the evening meal. Clark finished up the work in the garden and did the evening chores a bit earlier than usual. Marty sensed in him an excitement that he had not shown before. She knew that he must have dreaded the arrival of his little girl's birthday without Ellen there to share it. But as the event drew near, he wanted to make the most of it for Missy's sake. After they had finished their supper, Marty went to the cupboard for the cake. Missy's eyes opened wide in wonder, but she didn't understand its meaning. "Pretty, pretty," she cried over and over. "It's Missy's birthday cake," Clark exclaimed. "Missy's having a birthday." Missy was 1 year old, indicating one upright finger. Now Missy is 2 years old, and another finger joined the first. "See, Missy, 2 years old. Here, Missy, let me help you." He took the small hand in his big one and helped Missy hold upright 2 fingers. "See, Missy, you be 2 years old." "Too old," Missy repeated. "That's right," said her pa, well pleased. 2 years old. And now we'll have some of Missy's birthday cake. Marty cut the cake and was surprised at how good it really was. As she tasted it, she thought of her first effort with the biscuits. Now, thankfully, with practice and Ma's recipes, she could turn out things that she need not be ashamed of. 3 weeks had made quite a difference. When they had finished their cake, Clark, having asked for and received a second piece, Marty was about to wash the supper dishes, but Clark suggested that they first see what Missy thought of the gift he had purchased. She was only too happy to agree, as she was curious to see what would be the child's reaction. Clark came in from the shed with a small box. Then, lifting Missy out of her chair, he presented it to her. "For Missy's birthday," Clark said. Missy turned and looked at the cake, as though wondering if she was to put the birthday, meaning cake, in the small box. "Look, Missy," Clark said. "Look here in the box. This is for Missy on her birthday." He helped the child lift the top lid, and Missy stared in wonderment at the item in the box. Clark lifted it out, wound it firmly, and placed it on the floor. When he released it, it began to spin, whirling out in many colors of red, blue, yellow, violet, too many to really name. Missy clasped her hands together excitedly, too awestruck to say anything. When it stopped whirling, she pushed it toward Clark, saying, "Do it again! Do it again!" Clark did. Marty watched for some time before she turned to the dishes, and then suddenly she remembered her own gift. It certainly wasn't anything as grand as Clark, she mused, as she carried it from the bedroom. Maybe Missy wouldn't care for it at all. Well, she'd done what she could with what she had. So be it. "Missy," she said as she entered the kitchen, "I have something for you too." And she held out her gift. Clark's eyes widened. "Well, I be," he muttered. "Missy, Just look what your mama done made you. Marty knelt in front of the little girl and carefully fitted round her shoulders the small shawl that she had labored over. It was done in a soft blue with pink rosebuds embroidered on it. Tassels lined the edge, and they seemed to especially intrigue the little girls, whose hands kept feeling them. "Oh," said Missy. "Oh, Mama." It was the first time that she had called her Mama, and Marty found herself swallowing a big lump in her throat. She tried to hide her feelings by adjusting the shawl to hang right. Suddenly she was aware that Clark was looking at her, and there was a puzzled look on his face. Marty glanced down self-consciously, and in so doing saw with horror the reason for the look. In kneeling before the child, she had knelt on her skirt, pinning it down firmly, its tightness outlining her growing body, revealing it noticeably. Flushing, she clambered to her feet. "Now I've gone and done it," she thought. Well, she couldn't have done on hiding it forever anyway. Besides, why should she feel any shame? It was Clem's baby, conceived in wedlock and love. She couldn't help that he was no longer here to share the borning of it. Still, she didn't know why, but she just wished that this man who had taken her in didn't have to know about it until it was there, arrived and already growing. Well, there was no use to go fretting about it. He knew now, and there was nothing that she could be a-doing about it. She turned to the dishes, and Clark went back to playing with Missy. So pretty soon we're going to be hearing about 2 little babies. I'm not sure how much longer, but pretty soon. Alrighty, see you next time.